when a high school in my district decided to have a class about LGBTQ, they were given an option. Who wants to come? I think only like a handful, maybe less than 5 kids went in. The rest of the kids said, no, we don't want to take the class. They were in a gym. It shows like how unpopular that class was. There was a culmination of people to discourage Somali community from coming out and voting, from lifting up other African communities. Remember, today we have folks like Hulda. We have other folks from other African communities like Esther, who's Nigerian.
When people are talking about assimilation, they're not telling Somalians to behave like Kenyans or anything. They're just they're talking about consistency. So to assimilation, like we are fighting.
And this is the One Mic Show. Trump has gone after Somalis again from his Truth Social posts, where he claims Somalis are running Minnesota and taking over communities. He went further and said he frankly does not want to see Somalis here in the U.S. And there's also new fears as ICE raids are being intensified in Somali communities in Minnesota. Now, those fresh attacks from Trump have already spilled beyond U.S. politics. We are seeing Kenyan bloggers and influencers amplifying them, some African diaspora groups repeating them, and even some Black American spaces picking up the same talking points. So from your perspective, Hassanen, why do you think Trump's recent comments seem to be fueling anti-Somali sentiment, not just in the US, but also in Kenya and among other African and Black communities here? Hassanen.
Naanze na Ilhan. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Nitaanza na Ilhan. First, you have to know, man, we're proud to have a Black African lady in Congress who is part of a very elite group of Congress folks that are holding, space for us. She said on the foreign affairs, I think you remember when the Democrats lost, they had to kick her out of there. But she centered African issues in American policy. That's one thing that we cannot take away from Ilhan. Number one. Number two, she has been very outspoken about things that she has done in the 5th district. Listen, I'm just going to go back and just tell you. This Ilhan Omar comes from a district where maybe 15,000 folks out of over 200, 300,000 that vote are Somalis. You can't tell me she wins because of the Somali vote. No. What she has done is she has created a large tent where everybody's issue is being addressed and everybody feels they're part of her campaign. And that's why she has been winning over and over again. With all this negative rhetorics, big money, coming against her and everything being thrown at her. So here is a fact that I'm going to share with you guys. In the Somali community, we are very proud to say over 86, I think close to 90% of our population vote. We vote. We religiously vote in a higher percentage than most African communities or even some other American communities here, Does it make a difference? Absolutely. I'll tell you this. Some elections here in Minnesota, I'm going to be factual. And how right now in our house, in the legislative, I'll tell you, where Hulda sits, it's divided. It's a split house. There's 67 House members on both sides, Republicans and Democrats. Okay? In the Senate, there are 34 Democrats and 33 Republicans. So, and we have a Democratic governor. Let me start with this. Some of the Senate seats where they are 34, 33 right now were divided by, less than 200, 300 votes. Like, let's say St. Cloud, where a lot of Somalis live. And guess what? The Somali votes made a difference. Okay? If you go to Wilma, another spot, Somali votes made a difference. The person won by less than, I think, 150 votes. Again, made a difference. If you remember historically, Norm Coleman, who was a senator here in Minnesota, Republican, got beat by Al Franken by less than 350 votes. If 15,000 Somalis are religiously voting, remember, we have a thumb on the scale, so we can change the dynamics where it happens, right? And that's where we become the red meat for the Republican side. And they have used that over and over again with fake news that are being repeated. Now, I'll tell you this, historically, if you repeat lies over a long period of time, people believe it.
It becomes the truth, unfortunately.
Yep.
Yes. And then you also remember, perception is reality. People create this perception over communities.
Yeah.
And, you know, it goes over and over again. And remember, you know, and I tell these people, you know, folks who are my friends who are white, they have the white privilege that they can use to protect us. I tell them, you know, silence is complicity. You know, there's this culture in America. We talk about culture. There's this culture in America. It's called mind your own business. You know,
Hakuna nyumba
which
kumi.
sometimes, unaona, ni mind your own business. Inaleta shida sana. You know, that sometimes you say, you know what, I'm an 8 to 5 guy. I only vote on election day. I just show up and, you know, I make my own decision like on the last day and that's it. But if people bombard you, just like they bombarded the American population in 2016 election, you guys know how much it was influenced by all this fake boats, Russian agents, you know, foreign agents that were pouring in fake news about different kind of things, you know, that made that change. So I'll tell you this. The reason why we are being targeted is because the Somali community has been very vocal political wise. They have been very uplifting to other communities, other Africans that have been here, very helpful with other populations, you know, to win seats, you know, and they're democratic seats. So it creates that animosity on the Republican side, you know, and that has culminated to where we are today with Donald Trump going crazy. Remember, this is the guy who came in Minnesota in 2016, I think 2 days before election, at the airport to make a big scene telling, you know, folks that, hey, if you want to kick out Somalis out of Minnesota, you have to vote for me. You know, Ali, you and I shared some articles about folks who went in and supported Donald Trump.
Yes.
And I told you this, some of the individuals who did it, we had conversations with them. I personally had conversation with them. I was like, what's going on? And one of the things I want to share with you guys is this, is that the biggest center point of African families is children, right? There was a big push from the Republican side and all these conservative, crazy people that put in crazy money in telling parents that your kids are being taught LGBTQ stuff in schools everywhere, right? It was crazy. I mean, parents who were Muslims, who were Christians, showed up in school boards and pitchforks and said, no, I don't want my kids to be taught that, you know, and mind you, there is some control you as a parent has, you know, in this kind of studies. You know, for example, when a high school in my district decided to have a class about LGBTQ, they were given an option, who wants to come? I think only like a handful, maybe less than 5 kids went in. The rest of the kids said, no, we don't want to take the class. They were in a gym. It shows like how unpopular that class was. So there was a culmination of people to discourage Somali community from coming out and voting, from lifting up other African communities. Remember, you know, today we have folks like Hulda. We have other folks from other African communities like Esther, who's Nigerian, not because of only Nigerian community or Kenyan community, but also all African communities coming together and say, you know what, if Ilhan can be in Congress, you can be in the state house, you can be a senator, you can be a house, you can be a city council member, you can be a mayor. So all of those things are seen as us being the spark of the communities here in Minnesota. And I want to remind you something. Black folks in Minnesota, the percentage is 7%. We don't make that big of a population out of a 5.7 million in population.
Now, yes. So this is quite interesting because you also mentioned, because I was looking actually for the connection of these Trump sentiments, why like other African communities also launched onto them. And one of the things that that brought that up was what you've mentioned, because last year we did see the press conference by some Somali elders in Minnesota, where they publicly endorsed Trump's election. They argued that Trump brought economic stability, supported small business owners, and that his policies were misunderstood by the wider immigrant community. And then, of course, you brought up that issue of the LGBTQ community, which I think is one of those things that also needs an episode on it separately, because this has also affected a number of other Muslim communities. Now, many of us were actually not sure whether that group of elders that we saw, because that press conference is being shared and being replayed.
It's being recycled like a nonsense.
It's being recycled now that Trump has spoken against Somalis in Minnesota. Many of us weren't sure whether that represented the majority position of Somali Americans or simply the interests and frustrations of a small group of elders. When you look at the backlash that followed, especially from African immigrants and some Black American spaces, do you think that this perceived Somali endorsement of Trump is part of what's feeding today's anger and anti-Somali sentiment, especially from fellow Blacks, fellow Africans, and from Black Americans? Hassanen.
Yeah, so let's be realistic. You, Ali, I think you and I have known each other for a long time. You know, not only do I have that face that I help out in the community, I'm also involved in political circles as well.
Yes.
You know, because I know that in America, your livability is tied to politics. You know, how you get your health care, how your education, how you get your street outside your door, how you pay your taxes, everything is politics. You know, who you choose to represent you is going to affect how what happens in your pocket. So here's one thing I'll tell you. There's a culmination of how we reached here. I'm going to say this. The Democratic Party itself has some liability into this as well. You know, 66% of Democrats did not support the Gaza war. They want something to be done. If you look at the Democratic Convention, there was a state representative from Georgia, a lady of Palestinian heritage, who wanted to speak on behalf of the Palestinian people. She was not allowed.
Yes.
There were people who are, big delegates that were against the war. They were not given the platform, but the folks who are pro-Israel were given the platform, right? And then there was multiple questions put forward to Kamala Harris about the Palestine, you know? And she did not respond the right way. She, pretty much alluded as if this was not a center point for people to make a decision about their election. You know, she was saying, hey, you need to worry about economics. You need to worry about your livability. Don't worry about Gaza, you know? And that's where a lot of people felt like, you know what? I am not either voting for Kamala Harris or I will vote for Donald Trump. And you saw Donald Trump giving a deal to the Michigan, community, saying, you know what, I will stop this war from day one, right? And that imam comes out and says, hey, we are endorsing you because of what you say. And I tell them, I said, listen, Donald Trump is a liar.
That imam.
He's not going to do that. You know, we've been telling you what the Democratic Party puts us in a bind was saying, we are trying to convince people to come back to support, Kamala. And they are not giving us something to prove that support is worthy of this people's cause, right? They thought like, you know what, if Kamala wins, then we'll deal with Gaza as a secondary issue, right? We will not deal with it as a primary issue for those people to vote for us. That's number one. And that shows what happened. Like in the Muslim majority precincts, Trump won by 10% more, 10 points more in those areas. He got more numbers of voters, 10 points more than when he did in 2016.
Is that in Minnesota or in Michigan?
Yes, that's in Minnesota.
Okay.
And in Michigan as well, where he won. Remember in Michigan in 2016, when he won some areas, he did not win Diaspora, right? And this time he won majority. I think it was like 89% or something that he won.
So it's fair. So it's fair to say that Somalis, quite a good chunk of Somalis voted for Trump in this
absolutely. Now
in this
let me
last year's
hold your thought
election.
right there.
Yeah.
Yes, let me hold your thought right there.
Yeah.
Let's talk numbers, Ali.
Yes.
Somalis voted that way in Cedar Riverside area in certain, pockets where Trump was not supposed to be getting higher numbers. Yes, Kamala won, but Trump gained by 10 points.
Yes.
Let's look at a state like North Carolina, I think, where the Democrats won the governorship, the Democrats won state seats, but Hillary lost overwhelmingly.
Kamala.
And majority of the
Yes.
I mean Kamala, not Hillary. Kamala lost, overwhelmingly
Yeah.
on areas where Black majority population live.
Yeah.
So you cannot only hold Somalis accountable for not voting for Kamala when other Black areas have voted against her as well, or not even vote at all.
Okay.
You know?
That's fair enough.
Right?
And actually, there was a
Yeah.
stat that I was reading somewhere that Black men under 45 voted 30% for Trump.
Higher numbers. Let me tell you, this election, the Hispanics, the Asians, the Blacks, everybody voted in a higher percentile than what they did in 2016 when he won.
Okay.
Ali,
All right.
I think I can explain why.
Yeah, and before you explain, Mika,
reason.
yeah, before you explain, Mika, there's some callers. We're going to get to you. The number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. It seems Hassanen has attracted a number of callers who want to ask you some questions. So let's go to you, Mika. Mika.
No, as in my point was simple that I would say for the, as Hassanen said, the high percentage of young Black people or young Hispanic people, male voting for Trump was in fact contributed to a lot by those Red Pill podcasts.
Red Pill podcasts. Okay. Yeah. Na kwa wale hawajui Red Pill podcasts ni gani hizo, Mika, utawaambiaje?
In Andrew Tate.
Ni zile za Red.
Andrew Tate,
the comedian.
So this manosphere personalities.
Manosphere personalities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Aya, sawa. Before we go to the caller, Hulda here on Facebook. Let me see what Hulda is saying. Hulda says, "Thank you, my brother Hassanen Mohamed, for all you do for our community and our state. Leaders like you help break harmful stereotypes and lift our Somali brothers and sisters. We see you and we've got your back. So proud to have you as a constituent." That's Hulda Mumanyi, state rep, Minnesota. Yeah, and then let me see up. I have a couple of people also on YouTube. Ziki was talking about the MYOB, mind your own business. And then we have Weissman. Weissman, karibu sana. Weissman says Somalis are facing hate and discrimination because they are very smart and active people next to Jewish communities. They help each other and share business ideas. Again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. We have Hassanen Mohamed in studio talking about issues that the Somali community has been experiencing the past few weeks. Let's go to the first caller.
Thank you for calling the One Mic Show. 2658. Name and where you're calling from.
Caller?
Hello.
Mishai.
Caller, are you there?
But you go screen.
Okay, make sure is or maybe is it the audio? Let us.
Mishai.
Okay. Oh, wait.
Okay, so just give us a second, caller. Here we check the equipment to
sorry.
see. Okay, caller, name and where you're calling from. Sorry about that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Loud and clear. Name and where you're calling from.
Yes, this is Esther Mulusa, the infamous one, the one who says it like it is. I'm sorry to apologize in advance.
And we love
from
you
North
for that,
Carolina.
Esther. We love you for that, Esther. Talk to us, Esther.
I have so much to say. I don't know whether to make a number of phone calls or just try and mishmash everything in one phone call.
So get your basic point, whatever you can give us, like in 3 minutes, and then kama kuna point ingine, you can always come and call back. How many other callers do we have? We have 2 other callers. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Esther.
Yes. Just stop this. All right. So I don't know whether to go back to the history. You already mentioned shifter. The shifter was during before independence.
Yes.
The British hived out part of Somalia and put it in the northeastern province of Kenya. And the Somalis were not happy because, like the host says, they are homogenous people. They like being together, but they were forced to be part of Kenya. They did not like that, so they resisted, and the Somali government funded. You helped them to fight and try and get their autonomy back, get their land back. So what Jomo Kenyatta did was to call for British help, and they suppressed the Somalis, and they were forced to be part of Kenya. Something that they never forgave up to today, because they still feel that they need to go back to their country and be with their people.
And
before,
yeah, and before you finish, Esther, there's a little factoid I want to add to what you said, and this is something I found out just a couple of years ago. There was a referendum that was done before Lancaster, asking the people of what was then called the Northern Frontier District, do you guys want to be part of Kenya, or do you guys want to join your brothers in Somalia? And the result was overwhelming, over 90%. They wanted to be part of Somalia, which made 100% sense. So that's just a little factor. Esther, going back to you.
History.
Yes, and that's why Kenyatta had to call for British help, because it was hot. Now, another thing I know is that as a student of political science, I remember we were taught about what is Kenya's foreign policy. One of the Kenyan foreign policy was that Ethiopia and Kenya were friendly allies, and Somalia was not an ally. They had to come together because of the aggression from Somalia. But I don't know what our president is doing right now, because that is something that is supposed to be lifelong, for their own safety, for their own security. Ethiopia and Kenya were supposed to be together so that they, keep the Somali aggression down. But now everything is all mixed up. But I just want to say this, that the reason why these Somalis did not vote, we should just call things as they are. They did not vote for Kamala Harris because she's considered African American. Even when Martin Luther King and Malcolm X tried to go to Ethiopia, they were not received very well, because Ethiopians believe that they are superior even to the African Americans. So that is something you can look up in history and you will find it. These African Americans are very happy. They were very proud of Ethiopia. This is the only country that has never been colonized. So they went there, thinking they'll be received with open arms. That did not happen. So there are many, there's this an assimilation thing. When it comes to marriage, they do not assimilate. Then the problem in South Africa, there was serious xenophobic attacks against foreigners. But one thing that sparked these xenophobic attacks, now one thing I give the Somali people credit for is they are very business savvy. They put their resources together. Somebody said they're like next to the Hebrews. They went to South Africa, went into the townships, opened up little shops, and they did very well. They really did booming business. And they do that even in Kenya, They did they opened up these little shops in those little townships. But the problem is they did not assimilate. One of the behaviors the South Africans didn't want was that a Somalia cannot greet you in the hand, because they consider you to be inferior. You are Lengumu. You are a slave. Just like Ethiopians, they consider us to be at the top of that totem pole, that imaginary totem pole where the Mzungu is somewhere up there, So that is what made the South Africans really annoyed. How do you come into our country? We are, patronizing your businesses, and you cannot shake us in the hand. You treat us like we are inferior. So the Somali issue brought the xenophobic attacks to, up. And also, of course, they didn't like the Nigerians also flooding the country and all that good stuff. So another reason, you have already talked about how another resentment by the West is because of that Black Hawk Down during Clinton's time. The West was very humiliated. In fact, after Black Hawk Down, Western countries don't want to deal with African wars directly. They look for proxies. They look for somebody else to fight them. They don't send their Marines. They sent the best Marines to Somalia, the best of the best, and they were humiliated. I think one of them was even tied to horses and, split and all that, the way the Europeans used to do a long time ago. So they don't refer to us as slaves. They even say we look like, chura. They have all kind of, names. And then Trump, of course, has a problem because of this Congresswoman, Omar, who really is very extremely vocal, and to him that is, a bit much to take. So he has decided to attack the community. So people should not say that they voted for or against Kamala because of the question in Gaza. I don't believe that. I just believe that they saw this is a woman, she's African American, therefore we'd rather go with a white man because they consider themselves to be up there in the totem pole. So there's also this assimilation. Can I stop? Of
Yeah.
The way when
yes.
they talk.
So you've given us
the politicians.
Yeah,
Yes.
Esther, you've
I
given
haven't
us so
finished yet.
much. I know you've not finished, but you've given us so much so far. Let's first let
Yes.
Hassanen react to some of what you said, especially that part where you said you think that Somalis did not vote for Kamala because she's black and she's a woman, and it was not because of Gaza. So let's let Hassanen react to that, and then we're going to give an opportunity to the next caller.
But just hold on.
But just hold on. We will get back to you.
Yeah.
So
All right.
So
So
Hassanen.
I wanna
All right.
I
Yeah.
want to jump in real quick. I want to say this.
Yes.
You know, I have to create ethos, pathos, and locus. So whatever I'm going to say, like, actually has some value to what I'm going to say. I think my sister Esther is not correct in thinking that the Somali community did not vote for Kamala because of the color of her skin or because she's woman. Totally wrong. And I'm speaking from somebody who led multiple campaigns and it was in charge of like campaign offices and people who are out there door knocking and talking to individuals in my community to turn them out. You know, I previously have run many campaigns, personally as a campaign manager and also as a community activist. Nothing of that sort. By the way, that idea was actually put in by Donald Trump towards the African American community. African American community was the one that came out and was saying, you know, because Trump was saying, who is she today? Is she Indian or is she black? If you remember very well, you know, and he pushed that narratives over and over again. He did that too when he was facing the other Republican lady who was a former governor. She was a Indian who changed her name, Nimrata to Nikki Haley, you know, and said, who is she? You know?
Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley. Yes,
Yeah,
yes. I remember
yeah.
her very well.
You remember? So
The governor
so
of
he,
North Carolina, South Carolina.
he
sorry.
always, yeah, so he always plays those things. He divides it in the African American community. You can see on the blogs, on my friends, they're saying, okay, what are we dealing with? Which Kamala are we dealing with? Are we dealing with the Kamala who claims to be black, or are we going to deal with Kamala who went to college and put down that she's Asian and telling people that she's Asian? It was all fake news. It was supposed to create that distraction, you know, and he was successful because black folks meaning that, you know, folks who have ancestry here in the United States were the ones who said, you know what, you know, she has a dad who's from Jamaica. Her mom was from India. She doesn't represent our interest, you know, so we will be okay with voting for somebody else, you know. And that conversation came out after election where we said, you know what, black folks, we need to have a conversation, you know, because those are the statistics that came out. But in the Somali community, that never happened. The first and foremost thing that made a decision against voting for her was, number one, the Gaza issue, because a lot of young people were on TikTok. And you remember even Trump said, like, TikTok helped me win, you know, this election, right? Because he was able to pull in a lot of voters from the young population away from Kamala. You know, he was able to change people's directory. You know, one thing I want to mention is this: not only Somalis were voting for Trump. I manned a polling station in my district where there's a large West African community members. Guess what? Nigerians, Liberians were wearing Trump shirts.
Kenyans,
You know?
Kenyans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Kenyans were wearing Trump
Nigerians
shirts,
and
Trump
Kenyans
hats.
voted.
Yes.
Nigerians and
I
Kenyans
mean,
voted for Trump a lot of
I
them.
was shamed. I literally felt shamed that we had the craziest time in 2016 with the ban. If you remember, we were at the airport trying to release people from customs, right? Because of the ban that happened overnight, right? And these were people from countries. And then you remember, shithole country being brought out against Nigerians. Why the hell would you go and vote, you know, for this person, right? So I will say that that's one of the things that, and then on the South African side, the xenophobic, you can, if you remember, it's not that Muslims don't shake hands. I mean, the xenophobic was Nigerians. Are you going to say Nigerians didn't shake hands? The xenophobic was with Zimbabwe. Are you going to say Zimbabweans didn't shake hands? You know, it was an economical issue. Somalis and other Africans who are savvy in business came into small shanty towns and opened business. That created some form of a jealousy. The same thing white folks right now are going through. Whenever they see a successful Somali person that has happened, they ask, is this has to do with fraud? Because now fraud is the in thing, And then when we talk, and I'm going to jump this into something else, when we talk about Isli and businesses in Kenya, Somalis have had businesses in Isli, they build it out before feeding our future. Fraud cases, before any of the fraud cases.
And we're going to come to that. We are going to come to that Isli and feeding the future.
I just wanted to mention,
yes.
it's an economical thing that happened, and people tend to attach something to it to create a narrative that is completely wrong.
Okay, thank you so much, Hassanen. Now, let me read some few comments here real quick before we go to the next caller. Thank you, caller, for being so patient with us.
And that is caller 5667.
Yeah.
You're next.
So caller 5667, you're next. Now, there was here, Ziki saying there was an Arusha declaration where Somali Prime Minister accepted NFD to be part of Kenya. That is true. But then there was also a referendum that Somalis said that we do not want to be part of that. And this was, I think, pre-Lancaster, because the British were also trying to engineer a result that they wanted. And the Kenyan coast was also affected. There's so many different parts that were affected, but I think we need a whole other episode about Lancaster, which we'll work on getting one next year. Then we have
Ali. Just to mention, not only Lancaster, the previous referendum. You need to look at also the referendum for Ogaden region that never happened. You need to look at the referendum of the Djibouti that happened, but it was completely. They got cheated by the French until they got their independence in 1977. You can look at that referendum that they did, that put Djibouti under the French colony, denying them to be reunited to Somali. So all of those are all entwined. I think you should have an episode just dealing with those referendum needs that has not occurred.
We'll have another date with you, Hassanen, next year, and we're going to do an episode on that. You just gave yourself an episode next year.
Several episodes, by the way.
There's a guy here called Kauzi. Yeah, okay. On YouTube. Anasema, Kauzi is asking, is there a good book you recommend about the Somali history, pre-colonial up to today? So maybe when you might want to think about that, Hassanen, and you can give it to us later. Very
good question.
Ziki is saying, let's quit this nonsense. You just cannot force any community in Kenya to assimilate to another community. And then Tech Ted says, our Somali origin brothers have really suffered. It's time to stop this vice. And Ziki says, Kwanza, after COVID, I don't want to shake anyone's hands. Kwanza nikiona wenye wanacheza na mapia. Where?
Maybe it means Mapua.
Oh, Mapua. Yeah, I got to be careful catching some virus. And then Atero says, stop laying blame. You full-throated backed Trump. I think he's referring to Somalis. And then Ziki saying, I love this guy, Hassanen. He is well-informed. I also like the professionalism of the folks in the studio. Thank you so much, Ziki.
They didn't differentiate.
Thank you so much, Ziki. And then Atero says, Trump stated exactly who he was, and you said, I am good with that. Again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. The show is on fire today.
I think
yes.
Let's take a Wusa kidogo.
Yes. Let's go to the caller. Mika, let's give the caller. Yeah. Mika 1 minute, caller amekuwa kingojea sana. Mika 1 minute, and then we're going to go to the caller.
So I was saying, let's take a Wusa before we go to the caller. Let's take a Wusa on one thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Number one, I think when people are talking about assimilation, they're not telling Somalians to behave like Kenyans or anything. They're just they're talking about consistency. So to assimilation, we're fighting over mundane things.
Yeah, I think.
Right? So give an example, Mika. Give a quick example to understand.
So a quick example to understand is this, right? I will give you an example. When I was born and raised in Donho, right?
Yeah.
Neighbors wetu ilikuwa Kinabdi, and I don't know if you remember Caliph, the MP who was elected with ODM akakufa, then his son was elected.
Johnny.
because- No. There was an MP from Northeastern.
Oh,
what was
Khalif,
his name?
yeah.
Khalif,
Sanwake, yes,
yeah.
I remember. That was
Yeah, and then
during
his son was the
Kibaki's administration.
Yeah, and then his son was the one who. So his son was my classmate in Primo, in Doni Primo, right? These guys were Somali. They were in business, trucking business, like a very rich. And then at that time, walikuwa naishi Greenfields. And Greenfields ilikuwa imejua Somali. Wengi walikuja wengi wa Somali. Walikuwa na malori. Actually, ndo Omocha akitaja malori nikakumbuka hizo Fiat. Because najezanga hivi. Hapo nikitoka shule zimejaa hivi. So we lived with them in the community. Kina Zamzam were the first people to actually open like a supermarket kwa estate. Unaona, kwa store. So we assimilated with them, like tulikuwa tunajua ni wa Somali, tulikam tukaanza kukula snacks different na vitu different, but walikuwa Somali bado, but we lived with them peacefully. That is what assimilation means, like integrating, mnaishi peacefully. Si ati wanageuka wanataka kuwa Somali, wanakuwa Jaluo ama Kikuyu.
So
anyway,
but I think it should say coexisting, not assimilating.
Yeah, it's coexisting.
I think
coexisting.
Yes.
So you're coexisting. I'm still wondering.
Hiyo jina assimilation inafanya watu wanagongana hapa cause
sasa wacha nikwambie Mikasi, you America, watu wanasema assimilate. They don't assimilate. It's a white supremacy term that has been used. Ushona, usitumie hiyo assimilation. Mtu akija, wewe unaambiwa tayari, kama mtu mweusi unajua, mwacha mila ni mtumwa. America unaambiwa it's a salad. Everybody anakuja na flavor yake. Unaelewa? Utakikani kuwa na flavor ati nyote moja. You know? So if you look at historic context ya America, hakuna specific culture. Ni kila mtu anakuja na culture.
Aya, so let's give a chance to the caller. Caller has been waiting for a while. What's the last
call? Okay, 5667. Thank you for calling the One Mic Show. Name and where you're calling from.
Hello, my name is Daniel from Boston. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Talk to
Daniel,
us.
welcome.
Talk to us.
Yeah, very good. So on the boundary and the change, the referendum, I would really like to participate in that discussion. That is a topic I have researched and published on. It's a very big topic that's usually oversimplified. Now, I have to take task your guest today on a few things he said. By the way, I really feel sorry about what's happening about Somalia. It's very unfair. Somali is being scapegoated by Trump. Now, having said that, I would like to maybe push back on two areas, one or two things that came up earlier. For example, about how homogeneous Somalia is. Okay, true. But Somalia has other fractures that are serious, so they may not be tribal, but they are serious fractures. That's one reason why Somalia has had the issues politically it has had so far. So that's one. Second, the other example was Liberia. Liberia is not homogeneous. If you remember, when Samuel Doe took over from Talbot, if you remember those days, if you read back about it, the reason Samuel Doe did, the main reason he did, is because he argued that those people who came from the U.S., those people who were formerly freed slaves, they held on to power from the time Liberia was started up until that time. So even though they were a smaller percentage of the population, but they held on to power for too long, at the expense of the other people who were indigenous Africans, those who have always been there forever. So there were serious fractures in Liberia, and there has been even today. So it's not, Liberia has not been homogeneous, and I would argue Somalia is not homogeneous. It has fractures in other ways, the clan system and all that. So that's one. But the last thing, and this is actually the most important one, your guest has made the argument, and I can understand that there was an increase and there is a high, a sizable percentage of minorities who voted for Trump. But here's the problem, or here's the problem with that viewpoint, which is partially true. Those other minorities who voted for Trump, they have a lot less to lose than Somalis. So, for example, when someone is a Black American, when they are born here and they vote for Trump, they have way less to lose than someone who is an immigrant. An immigrant from Africa who votes for Trump has, I would argue, a little less to lose than a Somali. Somali always comes up for mention by people who hate immigration, people who hate Africans. They are one of the first 2 or 3 countries they'll bring up is Somalia. So for a Somali to go and vote for Trump, it makes no sense to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Daniel.
Daniel, before you go,
yes, go ahead. Yes.
No, I just decided to chat GPT, AI, this thing.
Yeah.
What I posed was, which are the only 2 homogeneous countries in Africa?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was, Africa is one of the most ethnically diverse continents, so finding truly homogeneous countries is rare. However, based on studies of ethnic composition, the 2 countries most often cited as being largely homogeneous are Somalia and not Liberia, but Lesotho.
Okay.
I just wanted to share that.
So,
Yes.
but
Very relaxed.
So on our guest's defense, he actually, when he was explaining the homogeneity of Somalia, he did not just explain based on politics. He actually explained it based on DNA.
DNA, yes.
Yes.
Ethnicity.
That is fine. So I think even with Hassanen, the Liberia part, I think the only correction there is Lesotho. However, Mr. Daniel, we would like, you've said you've researched on more. Can we get information of where you have?
You know, I've had conversations with Daniel.
Okay.
And I blame myself because Daniel is someone we need to have on the show.
Sasa,
how
are we supposed to learn this about borders?
Tulizeni.
Daniel, huyu mtu bwana.
Relax.
Okay, sawa.
Daniel is
professional here in the studio.
you
may attend. Okay, sawa. Okay, Daniel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but let's allow Hassanen to react to Daniel.
Okay, sawa.
Yeah, Hassanen.
First, I want to say thank you, Daniel, for coming on board. Yani, I don't have any much different to tell you, but I agree with you that the most highest thing that people will lose than the African American community when they make such decisions as Trump is the immigrant community, especially Somalis, since we are the red meat. There's no other country that has been mentioned negatively in circles of politics than the Somali community, So that's true. But you have to know this. The individuals that showed up in that press conference that say they were voting for Trump, is not individuals that just didn't come out of nowhere. We had conversation. Ali is my witness. I showed him the text and stuff that I had conversation with them. I literally have, and I'm saying, listen, you're putting your identity. Remember, when a white person stands, here's one thing that our community needs to understand. When a white person comes in and stands somewhere and says something, we look at that white person in the perspective that they're either Democrat or Republican. We never looked at them as they are German, Scandinavian, Irish, Italian, or anything. We look at them that. But once you're an African and you put your thumb on something, believe me, your identity to your nationality or even tribe comes to play. And that's where a lot of these individuals thought that, supporting Trump was a good thing. When he won, they were, shamefully celebrating it, right? But now when the community is being targeted and we have ICE driving in our Somali malls and it's empty, they're nowhere to be seen. They have written articles, they have taken interviews saying they're abandoning the Republican Party. But what does that have to do with lifting up our community? Our businesses are going down. People are scared. Kids are not going to school because their fathers cannot drive them to school.
The businesses are not opening. They're actually, we've seen, reports that are because of the targeting of ICE, businesses are actually not opening, and not only within the Somali community, the Latino community, and other immigrant communities,
Haitian community.
Once they have been
Haitian
told we are coming after you, the guys are like, okay, we're going to shut down, and for the safety of our workers, we don't want to be targeted. We don't want these guys to come in here and kick our doors in, so we're not going to open.
Okay. And look at this. Look at this. If you look, there were some Haitian who are on social media, even after Donald Trump said like they eat cats and dogs. So people make personal decisions, but on the community perspective, majority of us have pushed back that narrative. But remember, this is a country where you can make your individual decision, and that's where we cannot interfere with that decision. We can hold them accountable, but we can't stop them from doing it. But on the majority side of the community, we're totally against Trump. We stood up on 10 toes on that.
Okay.